Hey guys, so today I want to look at Sadio Mane and his movements and kind of compare them to myself and as well as Messi. So of course, he's not Messi, but he's one of the top forwards in the world. So I find like a lot of the same principles apply to him as well as Messi, and I can spot the difference and kind of just understanding that kind of helps my game. So let's first watch this clip of Mane trying to do finishing practice. So one thing I want to talk about that I haven't really talked that much before is, it's kind of like the subtle movements even before you receive the ball. So here, after Mane passes it, see the kind of movements. It looks simple, but he kind of does a little bit of a hop, like a spring there. I mentioned Messi does that too, but I find it's a good habit because as you receive the ball, you could kind of like turn up over there, and you kind of turn your knees and your ankles out as you um, approach the ball. Um, in a bit we can actually kind of look at what Messi does to try and avoid the defender because even if say like the defender's from a distance and he watches you, if you're too predictable, like you're like your hips are straight and you're like when you run it's just like almost like a casual jog to the ball. If you do that a couple times, they realize you're easy to protect, and they'll like press you and potentially tackle the ball a lot more. But it's always like not even Mane, but Salah, Mbappe, Lewandowski, like all the top forwards. They like generally have a sort of flair when they run and receive the ball. So after Mane touches the ball here, I'm not too sure here, but like you see, kind of like spins the ball like with the outside of his foot. But I think what's more significant is he almost does kind of like an elastical. You see, like his goes from inside of the foot to the outside of the foot while like spinning the ball. I mentioned Messi does that, but like with the outside of the foot, like kind of like you know brushes the ball this way while spinning it this way. So in this case, it kind of gives like a very quick impression because he changes from direction here to there because since he's touching with the like inside part of his foot, like it's should go there, and then by the time it like it leaves his foot, it's already pushed out to the outside. And now watch this part when he like does this run. It's a little bit different. Again, like it's the same principle. It's kind of feels a little bit blocked here, but it's sort of like a feint run where like it's kind of his hips are a little bit more pointed over to the side with his like leg and knee and ankle a bit pointed, not in a straight line. So like I find like a lot of like casual players or amateurs, like they might just like casually jog or run in like in a straight line in the sense that the hips are pointed square and like the knees are square and they don't really ever change like direction. But of course Mane being one of the top strikers, just kind of like even just a little bit of like a hip turn and like see it's kind of similar what Messi does, kind of like points it out and just a little bit of a feint run. I think what's interesting to note here is like you see his last step here. So I find a lot of times like when you want a bit more power, like you might like really spring and bend that knee and like really be ready to propel forward. Um, to take a good stride towards the ball, and then kind of side foots it there, and but it's got quite a decent amount of power for that. Um, no, I'm not too sure why, but this is just my opinion. I think Salah is a better finisher, like in tighter quarters. I think Mane is a better dribbler, like at least more of the midfield. Even in tighter spaces, but in terms of finishing, like I find like a lot of times to like do this kind of flare, kind of like feint run, but in the last one or two steps, he'll just go into shooting mode and like see kind of this. It's a bit more like straight on, and his hips are a bit more straight. I find Messi and even Salah like even this step like Messi will like turn his ankle out, like turn his hips and have the ball a bit closer, so the defender can't just block the ball, and even with not as much power, like the goalkeeper can't read it as easily. But I want to continue like with how he shoots. So I mentioned like a lot of good strikers like not even the top ones, but anyone who's like decent finishing, rather than like turn your hips onto the ball, they kind of like leave it open, or even like turn it out wide. While like rather than hitting it this way, they kind of like reach around and like hit more into the side of the ball in their perspective. But you see like how he hits the ball like there. You see like almost like he's tucking his head in and like really looking, and you see how he falls through. You see that hip is really still turned over there, and you see his head, it's still like almost like looking this way. I noticed a lot of other players did that, like Jamie Vardy and Phil Foden. Like a lot of times when they like shoot across their body, their like head like almost like looks like it's like tilted this way. I think naturally, I tried doing that, but it's not quite like that. But I find like naturally my head does tuck in, and I like try to look over there as I turn my hips against where my foot is sweeping. So actually, this short clip where I was uploading, I was kind of trying to like imitate Mane's technique with this kind of finishing, but there's a little bit of a difference. So let's watch this clip. So I wasn't going for like a feint run here, but kind of see it's a little bit different. Like my like ankles and my hips aren't twisted. To one side or the other, even just a little bit. So it can be potentially easy for an oncoming defender just to really close me down and block the shot. But let's go on with the actual strike. So like Mane, I was trying to like bend that leg and really get like a really powerful stride onto the ball, and then again like him trying to like keep that hip open as I strike the ball. See, that hip is open. I'm not turning it early. Now I do turn it a little bit, like late into the shot. It's kind of a feeling, but I try to make sure that I kept that like hip open upon contact. But you see, as with Mane, like that head's like tucked in, and he's still looking over there, and those hips are still turned over the side. Might be a bit easier with this more of the side of the foot rather than the instep, but I thought it was interesting to compare. Here's a clip of me trying to add a bit more flair to my run-up and trying to keep my hips like constantly open even in the follow-through. So there's a little bit less power here. So first, it's hard to see because my body's cut off, but I'm trying to like kind of turn my ankles a little bit out and my knees a bit out and turn those hips as I run while trying to keep a decent pace. As even in the last step here, I'm trying to see him. It's a bit subtle, but at least I could feel. I'm trying to turn that ankle a little bit and turn that hip out, and then as I strike the ball, you see like Mane, like I'm not trying to like tuck my head, but as I strike the ball, like I not only want to keep it open, I want to like even like turn out my hips a bit wide because I think it's natural to turn your hip into the shot. So as I struck the ball, yeah, maybe it wasn't as turned as Mane, but like at the same time, I could really feel like my head really tuck in and like almost like looking over this way. So yeah, so as I follow through, it's I don't really like turn my hips until like a lot later into the shot. To be honest, this kind of actually looks like Harry Kane's way of shooting. So I'm not trying to imitate Mane exactly, but it's kind of good to like get different components of his movements and maybe improve ways of shooting or dribbling like Messi does. This is a bit of an interesting clip because I mentioned how Mane like also like does a feint run like Messi, but it seems like the last step or two with his shot, he kind of goes into shooting mode. But I mean that it's like say you got a ball and like you got an empty net and you're just doing finishing practice with like no defenders or goalkeeper. I think of like the last two steps, he doesn't take into account of trying to like add some flair into his finishing. So let's watch this clip. So as Mane like kind of does his little feint and stutter, like and you see like kind of like has that like leg and knee sort of pointed out to the left with his hips pointed there, before twisting over there and doing the same thing. So I find like a lot of times Mane or even Salah like at this position he would try to shoot it there, but instead he does a pass. So I think it's kind of interesting because I think when he like in the mindset of trying to shoot, it's like. you kind of like you feel the defender pressing you, he would be a bit more discouraged to do that. I think if say he was trying to add a bit more flair to his finishing, he'd get that shot off without potentially being worried about getting it blocked. But instead he does that like a bit more of a pass since he doesn't need to generate that power. And I want to briefly look at this clip and see how Mane just runs even if he doesn't touch the ball. So after Mane avoids the defender, you see like even though there's no defender immediately pressing him, you see like that leg, it's kind of bent at the knee and the ankle out, with his hips, and then he turns those hips like this and just the feint. See it again, and then crisscrosses and then continues on with his run. So I find like a lot of players, like especially when I watch non-league, even though I have like quite a bit of space, they may take a few touches and then they get tackled. But if you can like do it at pace and also like add some flair, that can help avoid an oncoming press. Also, when I look at these subtle movements, just for comparison.
Link. Johnson.
So that's this, I guess this fullback receives the ball. You see, kind of like does these like steps. It almost looks like he's like standing almost straight and like not really changing directions as much. So of course, like there's nobody immediately pressing him. But if he were to immediately get pressed, I find a lot of times in like these lower league sides, like the fullback will panic and they'll just try to hit it long or just do a really early cross somewhere in here. Because I think we've all seen it, like where like you say that get really pressed, even though like just a lot of initial space, because of like the lack of like flair or like it's very easy to predict in the press. And let's just watch this clip trying to avoid the center back's press, but just get tackled. So after the pass to this number 9 here, you see initially he's got quite a bit of space to this center back, but you can see as he receives it, he gets pressed. So you kind of see what he does here. He tries to like almost do a coif turn or hit it behind his other leg, and then the defender gets a good tackle in. So if you were to watch like a bunch of Messi clips, especially in this position, do you think Messi would typically get tackled here? Usually not, but if we were to like back this clip up a little bit, at this point, a lot of times Messi starts stuttering. He does all these little feints even before he gets to the ball. I find like this is better than amateur, of course, but I find like a lot of amateurs, they kind of just like stand still or even might just do a little slight jog, and then do their move like this kind of coif turn, but. The defender's good enough. They'll get a tackle in since you need to like be on top of the situation, because if you don't turn your hips like or in your legs and knees, like you keep it constantly straight. They know the possible lanes you might go through, so they can just figure out which angle to block off. Okay, and let's watch how Messi does these subtle movements, even though he's not necessarily dribbling the ball at that point in time. So this, as I mentioned, kind of like has his hips pointed over this way before heading over to the other side. And one thing I've been trying to do is a lot of times when he touches the ball, he might also like after he touches it, kind of like do a little feint there, kind of like turn that hips and like have that knee pointed out this way. But you see, like after like that ball's over there, so find like a lot of amateurs, those casually just like kind of jog or run in a straight line to get it. But you see, after he touches it here, see like his knee's really bent, and he kind of like staggers his step, and like he's kind of like ready to like pounce potentially this way before taking an inside touch. And then here, I think it's just a bit more of just some subtle feints, not like really heavy feints. Takes a touch here, just a slight, feint with his hips turned there, crisscrosses, the slight move over there before kind of doing like another feint, and then doing an inside cut. Yeah, so here's my attempt. So after I, touch to the side here, like trying to keep that leg bent. Messi's bent a bit more, so I can experiment with that. And then, trying to like kind of stagger my like stance because, I say there's like a defender here. I don't want him to press me, so, just kind of like doing this can like potentially avoid the early press. Yeah, so it's actually a lot harder than it looks. It took me like several sessions to actually uh, get something relatively that looked what Messi did. And here's a clip of Messi kind of doing this feint run, but a lot heavier before receiving the ball. So as Messi receives the ball, see that like foot kind of crosses in and kind of like turns the hips there, and then again see that hip kind of turns out wide like this, and then as he comes, kind of does another fairly heavy of hip turn with his leg kind of and knee pointed a bit more to the side, and again kind of a bit more of a feint with his hips turned. Continues doing this until he receives the ball. So, just a great way to avoid the press.